Hey, what's going on, YouTubers? This is Zen Manga here, and I hope you're having a great day. So, if you're enjoying my content, give me a like, subscribe, comment, and definitely hit the notification bell so you know when I'm coming out with new videos. And shout out to all the brand new subscribers who are on my channel. Just in case you don't know me, I'm Zen Manga, or you can call me Zen. And this is primarily a comic book, video game, and movie reaction based channel. Where I jam out, talk about certain concepts, what I'm pretty much into. And if you're enjoying some of that content, then I encourage you to talk about this too. So we're going to get right into it. House of X number 2. So let me bring out these bad boys real quick. So starting off, oh, not this one. That's another good book though. So we have House of X number 1, which is a phenomenal story. And then we have Powers of 10. It looks like an X, but they want you to pronounce it as Powers of 10. And then also we have number 2. So House of X number 2. Now, out of all the stories, this is the one that stood out the most. And here's why. Now, there's a character named Moira McTaggart. And we've always known her to be basically a mutant geneticist, right? She's worked with Charles Xavier for many times throughout, all of the comics that we read, right? And she happens to be one of his loves. Now, some of you will probably say, what about Leandra from the Shi'ar Empire? Well, think about it this way. Have you ever been with more than one person, right? Have you ever loved more than one person? So it's the same thing with Professor X, right? So he was with Moira McTaggart for a while, and then he wasn't. Things of that nature. But that's not the importance of the video. Now, for a long time, we just knew her as a geneticist and things of that nature, and we didn't pay that much close attention to her. Stories weren't really driven around Moira McTaggart for a long time until Jonathan Hickman took over the X-Men. Now, Jonathan Hickman has done something revolutionary, right? He's Now he's not retconning things, right? But what he's doing is enabling one character with a seemingly new mutant ability to do something that puts us in a new mindset. Let's kind of cut to some of these panels because I know some of you are seeing my excitement, and the excitement is because this was so well done, and I've never really had to think about a comic book for so long way after the fact that I've already read it, right? So I read it about 8 o'clock, and it's about 2 p.m., and I'm still thinking about the comic book itself. So we're going to go through a couple of panels, but we're not going to go through every single panel. And the reason why is because I want you to go out and get this book and support Jonathan Hickman and also all the people who contributed to creating this amazing story. So, we're not gonna start with that one. Oh man, the excitement is real on me. I know, I know. We're just gonna start off with one little picture, right? And this picture is of a baby, and it'll pretty much give you the premise of Moira McTaggart as we know her, right? So I'm just gonna enlarge this a little bit. So it's been, oh man, and some of you are gonna be like, no, really? Is that what's happening? Um, in House of X number 1, we saw Moira McTaggart basically come at the end, talking to Professor X, and Professor X was younger at this time, and he was basically didn't know her, but she knew him. So we believed, as readers, I generally believed that she was an imposter or something of the sorts, right? No, it was definitely her. So what's explained to us in House of X number 2 is that this whole entire time we've been reading X-Men comic books, things of that nature, that Moira McTaggart was always a mutant. Like, always a mutant. So some of you are probably wondering, okay, she was always a mutant, then what was her mutant ability? So get ready for this. So Moira McTaggart has the ability called reincarnation. So this is why I put up that picture of a baby. So this is actually one of the panels from the comic books, right? Uh, Now, here's the thing. Moira McTaggart um, is not immortal in the sense that she can live forever. Hypothetically, she can, but she has a weakness. Like all mutants, mutant abilities manifest upon basically puberty for the most part, right? For her, she gets her powers of reincarnation, so to speak, at 13. Now, when the book is introduced on number two, she basically goes all the way through 13. She has this really powerful fever, right? She beats the fever, right? And she goes on through her life, has a family, things of that nature, and then dies at a ripe age of about 74 and change peacefully, right? She then retains all of her memories in the embryo of a new coming, right? And first when I read it, I was like, okay, this is kind of like weird. Is she like in a brand new body? Basically, what's happening is she's reincarnating, but it's a little bit more than reincarnation. She reincarnates in the same body she originally had, retaining all the memories, but seemingly time is reset. But it's not that time is being reset. It's almost as if there's a divergent timeline that's being created every time she dies and then resets. Confusing, I know, a little bit confusing. Think about it like this: she's when she dies, if she could die naturally of natural causes, or just she just dies after her powers manifest at 13, she reincarnates into her original baby form, embryo, things of that nature, same family, same everything, but she retains all the knowledge from the past life. Now, why is this important? It's important because Jonathan Hickman has done this in a way where she has gone through many possible timelines already, or divergent timelines. I want to say divergent timelines, right? Where she's met Charles Xavier, didn't really like him because he was pretty arrogant, or she saw that he was pretty arrogant. In one timeline, she's created the cure for uh, basically becoming a mutant in order to reverse the process. Uh, in another timeline, basically she goes through a timeline and then she ends up meeting someone called Destiny, right? So I'm going to bring up the Destiny thing. Now, this is really cool. Destiny and Mystique. If you read the old X-Men comic books, you'll know that Destiny and Mystique were together. They were inseparable. They were part of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, things of that nature. Now, Destiny's ability is precognition, right? She's able to see kind of like a broad spectrum of the future of what's going to happen. When I say broad, she doesn't know, she can't tell you like, oh, if you do this, this will happen, right? But she could uh, briefly see a broad spectrum of it, which is pretty phenomenal on its own. It seems even more specific in this comic book, but basically she comes up to Moira McTaggart, who at this point is on her, I believe, second timeline, or second life rather, right? She's on her second life, and she's already created a cure for becoming a mutant, right? Put on quotes because cure, right? Because it could be, it's up for debate if it was a cure or not, or it's part of evolution, right? Which we know it's part of the evolutionary phase set upon the experimentation led by the Celestials. With that being said, Destiny has the ability of precognition. Now she knows the forecoming of what could possibly happen if Moira McTaggart then says, "Oh, I have the cure for this," whatever like that. But Moira just simply believes that it's really kind of like an illness. It's kind of a disease. It's something that the body's not supposed to be exposed to. It's kind of like a cancer, things of that nature. And they're saying no, it's not. And you can't say to someone that this is a cure when they don't need to be cured. So a lot of philosophical um, content behind that. Now, basically what um, basically what she's saying to Moira is like, don't do this. And basically, if you try to do this, I will eventually I will kill you in your next life or this life right now. And she lets her know the weakness of her power, right? And that's how I have the understanding too, that she can technically die and not be reincarnated. If she dies before her reincarnation, but if she dies before her powers manifest at the age of puberty, then she could technically just die, and then the loop is done, right? Um, and Moira the reason why Moira has the understanding of it being like something that's wrong with her is because it's kind of like a curse in its sorts. It sounds cool, right? I'm reincarnated, but then to go over the same loop over and over again, it kind of is like, But basically, what Destiny is saying to her is like, what are you doing? Like, what are you really doing with it, right? Um, do it for something that means something. Reincarnate, learn from it, do something, and that's where we're getting into the we hear Moira talking to us, the readers, in the beginning of the book, saying like, "What would you do if you could do things all over again?" Right? Which is a really powerful question that many of us contemplate many times. Right? If you could do this again, what would you do differently, knowing that you have the knowledge that you have now? So, with that being said, Moira uh, goes through different lives, right? Future lives. And she basically goes through the process of doing things a lot differently for the benefit of mutant kind, right? Um, she still creates the mutant cure, but never really uses it. And she even gets to the point where things still happen the way that, because one of the things that Destiny says that mutant kind will be decimated by humans, and so Moira tries to stop it by learning. She's there for all the iterations of like X-Men stories, right, that we all know and love, that you see in this picture right here. Cool. She comes to the point when she ends up it ends up being a timeline where it's still the same things are happening, right? um, And she decides, you know what, let me do things a little bit differently. Let me try to align myself with like Professor X, seeing how things work. Same thing happens, right? Next iteration she uses, she tries to align herself with like Magneto in this timeline or this alternate divergent timeline. And same thing happens. So she says, because it's the Sentinels who come eradicate the humans, things of eradicate the mutants rather. Same thing happens. So she decides, the Trask family, Bolivar Trask is the one who creates the Sentinels. So it makes sense, right? It's kind of like the whole, um, well, what if you go back in time and kill Hitler? Would it change everything? Like, would that solve all problems? It's kind of like this. She goes back and she kills Bolivar Trask and his whole entire family, and come to find out, even though that same specific Sentinel type was not um, built, Sentinels were still type of Sentinel still came about, right? So that didn't really help. So she's like, what do I do? And she aligned herself with Magneto. Didn't work. All of the Avengers, the X-Men beat him basically, and everything still came to fruition. She even decided to align herself with in one of her lives. I think it was on the seventh life. She aligned herself with Apocalypse. Now, they weren't successful. They went against the humans, things of that nature, but they ended up creating like stronger Sentinels, and still they lost. Right? Still, everything happened. Humans basically and robots basically overtook um, the mutants. Right? So nothing really came to fruition. So, with that being said, at that point you would get pretty frustrated. Now, as a geneticist and someone she's basically this whole entire time been doing an experiment. What changes will lead to a specific outcome? What actions will lead to the most favorable outcome by aligning myself with these people slash influencing these different choices and actions, right? To have the outcomes. So she says, now if you look at this picture right here, I'm going to make this picture a little bit bigger. Now remember, she retains all the knowledge, even in the embryo. Now some of you might say, like, doesn't that like isn't that feel confined that she's a baby and she has all the memories of what she can do, basically? Now she mentions this earlier that, it's still, even though she has all the memories, doesn't mean that she doesn't feel comforted in that form as a baby, right? But it's kind of like it's just like a bigger version or a more specific version of people who say they have experienced a past life, right? But for her, she's experienced many past lives, which brings us to the near conclusion of this book. Now, the conclusion of this book, now, Moira has already done something like this already, where she's told Professor X about everything that's kind of happened before in her past lives, but it didn't work out in that timeline. She's now made it up to the 10th timeline or 10th life for her before the 11th, because I think the 11th is when Destiny proclaims that she will not live past, right? That something does happen. So here we go. And this 10th one, which is the end of this book, is actually the start of Powers of X #1. She talks to Professor X, but she also says like, and Professor X, Charles Xavier is like, have I met you before? And then she's like, yeah, I have. You know, we've known each other for quite a while, which is now that quote makes sense from the first book because she has known him for a long time. Now it's not just about like knowing him in one variation of the timeline, right? Now it's about she's known him for approximately, going on a 10th, whatever. I don't want to put it in quantitative years because we don't know. We only know from the first book, the first timeline, or Divergent Life, how long she's lived. So with that being said, she, I think she does the biggest hack that we've ever seen before. She lets Professor X at this age, whatever age this is, I think he's, in Oxford University going to college. She lets him read her mind, which means she's a Professor X. Charles Xavier is about to get approximately 9 lives worth of knowledge of everything that she's went through, gone through to have all these specific outcomes in order to then come up with this specific conclusion. Because I don't believe that she's let in. If I read the comic book again, she never really let him read her mind to the point where he's gathered so much information, right? So imagine with all that information, all that life experimentation, what will happen now? Which leads us to the current timeline, or yeah, the current timeline to see what's going to happen with House of X and Powers of X, right? But I think everything that has happened is what's going to lead to the Powers of X Powers of 10 rather. I keep saying Powers of X because it just rolls off my tongue easier that way. Powers of 10, which makes sense. This is her 10th life. And then we also have the book that's called Powers of 10, right? Uh, so Jonathan Hickman is doing something drastically insane, right? And what I mean by that is he is not retconning anything. He's only making things that we already have experienced brand new. Um, which then leads into the question. Some of you may be confused about her powers, and I'm gonna tell you the truth. I'm a little bit confused too, and here's why. Does that mean that she's she's responsible, but is she responsible for a certain type of timelines that we've seen in other X-Men comic books, right? Because now we get a chance to really look under the lens, the magnifying lens, to see what's really going on, what has happened, where some of the alternate timelines that we've seen in other books fail attempts by Moira McTaggart. Now, I'm not saying all of the timelines that we've ever seen in the comic books are because of her, but and we know that because they only showed us 9 types, right? And because they only showed us 9 types, that equals to 9 lives of Moira McTaggart. Now we're on the 10th iteration. That means that she must have we've in some way must have seen a divergent version. Is she the one who caused um, Days of Future Past, things of that nature? I would have to go back and really like think about this. But again, it's making me think she has reincarnation, but she's also reset into a time point. Does that mean that she's resetting time all the time? No, she's not resetting time all the time. She's just creating new timelines, divergent lives, right? If that makes sense. And they do a real. I'm still confused about it, but in an exciting way, not like, oh man, this doesn't make any sense. And then the comic does lead you into a map of Moira X or Moira 10. Right now we're on Moira 10, right? I think that was a better way to explain it. They say Moira 1. It should have been like me explaining Moira 1 to this timeline, Moira 2, things of that nature, not her lives, but you get the gist of it, right? And they go on to explain it really well. They give you a whole map, so I have to really go back and read the map just to understand it a little bit more. It's pretty cool, everyone. It's pretty cool. I never expected. I'm just showing you. You kind of see it, right? Year 15, year 17, year 19. What happens? Moira gives birth. Da da da. And then this is the. If you look at the top, this is the first Moira one, right? Then second Moira two, and then the black at the bottom is basically it just keeps on going, right? All the different iterations of her lives. But now we're on Moira 10, which is going to be the most exciting part. Um, it's pretty cool to know that Moira will die, though. And here's why. It's not really cool, but you know what I mean. Because they want this to be, they want Moira to be a main part of the comic, but they don't want it to be like a cheat, right? Like, oh, Moira dies and then she comes back. Now we're on the 13th timeline, like 20 years later, right? Will they revisit this at a later point? They probably will, but in many years to come. But we know how we know how comic books work, right? Um, so anyway, everyone, this is a really phenomenal story. I am still thinking about it. I'm thinking about both Powers of 10 and House of X now because we see a possible future that leads to an outcome that then has a lot of questions. And then now we have, like, I am so immersed in Moira McTaggart, and I never thought I would be. Like, this character is now amazing to me. She's amazing to me because that power has been, when you're reading a comic book and you're like, okay, that person has firepower, that person has teleportation power, that person could fly, right? But then you're sometimes out of the blue you get certain characters that have a power set that you're just like, whoa, they really fit it into a story really well. And that happens to be Moira McTaggart, who now I feel like watching the old Fox 5 uh, 1992 version of X-Men, reading old comic books and then kind of like reading and then going back and be like, Moira was a mutant the whole entire time. The one question I have, which is probably easy to understand, is how come? Well, no, this is not hard. It wasn't as if. You know what? What I'm thinking about is how come no one ever picked up that she was a mutant on a genetical level, right? But I'm pretty sure, like, if in Sentinels, Moira was always around mutants anyway. It's not like Sentinels were like Moira McTaggart is by herself; she's a mutant. So even if they went to like she was around mutants, they would probably pick that up, and she was around danger anyway. Um, so I don't know. It's pretty stellar. This book, man. this this book is amazing. Jonathan Hickman. If you were, I'm so confident right now. Forget about it. If you were worried that the X-Men were going downhill because they were for a long time, it's done. That era is done. Welcome back, X-Men. Thank you, Jonathan Hickman and Party, everyone who's worked together to create the artwork and this phenomenal story that's somehow going to intertwine. And this is only the third book. This is only the third book. How can only not three books, do so much? They have already reworked the whole entire landscape of the X-Men, but they haven't retconned anything. They haven't said, oh, cheat sheet. Um, Kind of like for some of the characters, right? Like where time is kind of like let's just reboot everything by just going back in time, right? This is a lot more cultured, right? This is beautiful. This writing is beautiful. To be able to give someone a power that is kind of a curse, to then go back, redo things, learn from their mistakes. It's kind of like Hickman is basically saying that the last 10 years as well has been just writers learning from, or learning from his mistakes in order to get to this point. Anyway, I'm going to cut this video because I am ranting. But this specifically, on a side note, this comic book has led me to want to create a series. And the series is about I don't know what to call it, but the fantastical abilities that we had, or the more obscure powers that we haven't seen before. And I have a lot of characters that I want to do a video on. For example, I'm gonna leave it with this note. Um, Leech, Leech is one character. Now his powers are not too obscure, but then here's another person, right? Forget Me Not. Some of you are like, who's that exactly? Video right here. This is Zen Manga saying peace, love, and prosperity. Give me a like, subscribe, comment down below. Just basically your thoughts if you have read this book or if you're just excited to read it and you want to know more. I will continue to do more series on House of X #3, but also Powers of 10 #2 next week. All right, take care, everyone.